and welcome to Pocket Watch, where we deep dive on the best and worst TV and film the universe has to offer. I'm Stephanie Bendixson, and today we are saying a heartbreaking goodbye to the Disney Plus series WandaVision as the season has come to a close. I am joined by Will Yates and Nick Richardson. Nick, if there was an entry about you in the Book of the Damned, what do you think it would be?
There are no entries about me in the Book of the Damned, Stephanie. There are chapters.
Will, if there was an entry about Nick in the Book of the Damned, what do you think it would be?
I think he'd have his own book called The Book of the Damp. Hey?
Oh, that's a deep
that's
cut.
Nice. That is a reference to Nick's perpetually damp hands.
All right, let's just chill it on perpetually damp and say in times of great stress.
It's got its own book. So
it's got its own book. We're, of course, doing a spoiler warning. We're going to be talking about the season finale of WandaVision and referencing episodes that came before it. If you haven't seen the show, if you haven't seen the final episode, please go watch that first before listening to this, and then come back here and you'll hear all the cool, spicy things we have to say about it. We're going to do like a quick reaction to what we saw in this finale, and then we'll deep dive and break down each moment as it happened throughout the episode, right until the thrilling conclusion. Nick, how did you feel about this wrapping up of the entire season of WandaVision?
There was lots of stuff I really liked about it. There was some stuff I wasn't as hot on. Ultimately, I feel like the show overall very strong, but ended very marvelly, and it didn't start very marvelly. And I think that for me, that's the I guess an inevitability, but also I was a little disappointed that it ended in such a sort of like, we'll all be back in the next movie, TV show, comic, whatever. But there was still lots to like in this episode.
What about you, Will?
yeah, look, the Marvel films, they can either like land their third act, that's either where the film starts to sing, or that's where it like all falls apart. And I think sadly my like fears from the last two episodes kind of got realized here. I'm like, oh, the show slipped. It slipped away. But I think the emotional crux of the show did land, which I think in the end is the most important thing. That we were on this journey with these characters. So I was happy kind of where that all ended up.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was reasonably satisfied. I think also I was hanging my hopes on things that would have been terrible if they actually happened, because I always want the best possible, happiest, lovely ever after outcome for all the characters, which would be both satisfying and wholly unsatisfying at the same time. So I think that it hit a good middle ground in terms of like tying a bow on this whole thing without making it too perfect. But I think they always do a pretty good job of leaving you wanting more and excited for what's to come, be it film or future TV shows and what's next for these characters.
I think the most important thing was that it turns out that the actor that Paul Bettany admires the most is himself, and that, if anything, was worth his entire journey to have that realized.
Yeah, I saw I read a hilarious article that was like, it's going to be Dick Van Dyke because they talked about the Dick Van Dyke show and Dick Van Dyke is going to be in WandaVision. And it was like, no, once you guys put that forward, it's like, oh, of course that was it. It was a very smart-ass move on his part that was, I guess, really delicious to have realized. Okay, so if we start with the first scene, we kind of really picked up almost immediately where the previous episode left off. Agatha was, she takes power from the undeserving. It's what she says is it's kind of her thing. We see our first glimpse of Wanda's life force, magic, or whatever it is, being absorbed by Agatha. And then she throws a car at her.
Yeah.
So that's pretty great. And we had that great sort of Wizard of Oz reference with the boots underneath the car. I just loved that. That was such a cool little nod.
I was waiting for them to curl. I wanted them to curl.
I think that could be copyright.
Yeah, they probably can own it.
Yeah, they probably do.
Yeah.
Then Cataract arrives really quickly. He's just there all of a sudden. And we had that really heartbreaking moment where for a moment it seems as though he's going to look at Wanda and be like, oh, it's Vision in there somewhere, until he tries to explode her head by
Yeah,
squishing it
it's not the
Oberon
heart that's
Martell
breaking.
style. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's a very gummy looking boy. As soon as we got like the fingers, that they're a little bit thicker.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's like he wasn't painted, and you could just see the softness underneath the sort of like the metallic paint that would normally be there. He actually looks like this is a cut for all the parents out there. But back when Woolworths were making Ushies, there was the Marvel run of Ushies or the Disney run of Ushies, and some of them, when you put them in the freezer or in cold water, they turn red and they change color. But when they're not in the freezer, they're just white. And he looked exactly like a warm Ushi. So for people who don't know what I'm talking about, you'll just move on from this. But those of you who do know what I'm talking about are like, Nick has never said a more fucking true thing as in his entire life.
Amazing. Cataract arrives and he's super scary. He tries to kill Wanda, but Vision swoops in, saves the day, and this kind of sets up the two battles that are happening throughout the episode between Agatha and Wanda, and then we've got Vision versus Vision, or Cataract versus Vision, I suppose. And then we kind of get Wanda's first appearance. It's like 2 episodes ago. Like the whole, like we...
Oh, Monica.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Monica. Like she just... I was kind of wondering what her involvement was going to be in all this, and I feel like she was kind of underused towards the end. We sort of like moved away from her, and we had this moment where like she's kind of in the attic with Evan Peters.
Yeah, there's a weird thing going on in the last few episodes, I feel like, where everyone who was outside of the bubble originally kind of just stops being relevant, and it felt like they didn't really know what to do with them. Like Monica in the attic, kind of tying up the whole Pietro sort of misdirection thing. We'll talk about it later, but like Darcy at the end and stuff. Like I feel like a lot of these characters were just like, we don't really know what we're supposed to do with them now, and we just got to give them a scene. So she's kind of just like sitting up there with him, and he's keeping her a bit trapped. Yeah. It was just a bit. It felt a bit like these cool things were about to happen, and now some dude is just playing guitar to a woman in an attic.
Yeah, and also just kind of felt like, I don't know, it almost felt like the timeline didn't match up. Like there was all this stuff happening in a certain time period, and then it was like Monica was in the attic for like ages maybe. I don't know if that was just like me being confused with it all. I also wonder, like if this was a film, my assumption would be, oh, they shot other stuff and it's just been cut. But they don't really do that with television, do they? Everything's very carefully storyboarded for a certain runtime.
It definitely felt like there was an episode that I missed. Where whatever this relationship going on between them of like, oh, like obviously he appears when she's looking in the attic and stuff, but just like, it just felt like something is here. There's something here that we're supposed to know about, but it wasn't really. It was more just like they were babysitting each other's characters for this episode.
Yeah. And then we kind of move into scene 3 where Wanda makes her way into the town center and Agatha confronts her with the knowledge from the Book of the Damned, which is called, what is it, Will? What is the book's actual name?
The Darkhold.
The Darkhold. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. The Darkhold. Yeah. It's your destiny to destroy the world, she says. And Agatha sort of releases the townsfolk from Wanda's spell. And she's kind of explaining that she kind of needs to, she's the one that's kind of trying to convince her to, I guess, free everyone and to show them that the only way she's going to be able to keep her family is by kind of releasing the people, but like, I guess, staying within the bounds of the world, or maybe she's trying to kind of make her realize that she is kind of evil or a villain herself for what she's doing, because even though she's gone through these several points of realization that these people are in pain and what she's done is really horrible, she still hasn't let them go.
Sorry, Will. I thought you were going. The thing I would say about that is, I thought this was a really effective scene in terms of, like we've seen the fear sort of thing, but this again sort of like had the idea of like what is Agatha's true intentions here, where she's sort of like showing that she's definitely seems more evil than she did last episode, where I think there was a 50-50 split of what's going on. But when she releases them and is like, I just cut her strings, there's a whole thing about Vision there as well, about the idea that like he was a puppet with his inception, and there's some sort of parallel there. But I think that as the townsfolk over the course of this episode all got revealed, it really, I don't think it did as good a job, but it was going hard on the idea of like Wanda being the Scarlet Witch already, Wanda already being evil in some way, which I think this set this up, and I was kind of excited to see where the episode would go with it. And ultimately, I feel like it kind of whiffed on the idea of like it gave a lot of forgiveness to Wanda for what she did. But because this is still scary to me every time they get released from that sort of like fugue state. It's still very creepy every time I see it.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the sympathy lies with Wanda because it's coming from a place of grief. I guess it was just from this. She seems to have gone through enough of a process of revelation to have at least been able to kind of release the people from their spell while maintaining a world where her family can exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, I don't know, I haven't sort of viewed her as a villain at any point up until, I guess, maybe now, when she's selfishly choosing her family over the rest of the people. But then at the same time, you kind of sympathize with that same idea as well, because she just, at no point has she ever really done this with a malicious intent, even if a lot of people have been kind of casualties of what's been going on inside her mind. When we move back to Monica Rambeau and Quicksilver, she discovers the identity of him as just like some random actor, and that the powers that he had were tied to a necklace that Agatha gave him to kind of charm him into being this character. So all of the theories we had about this kind of version of Quicksilver was just wrong. He's just a random guy, Will.
This whole show seems to, like, anything that we thought was exciting was only there to distract us from Agatha, who we already knew was the villain.
Yeah.
It's such a strange, like, there's just a lot of misdirects throughout the show, but all to avert you from Agatha's doings. But the whole time we knew it was Agatha. So it's just the reveal that, he's a Ralph Boner. The fact that they cast Evan Peters for a dick joke feels a little bit hurt. Like, I understand that, this episode did not have time to go into how he could be Quicksilver or how the multiverse is kind of going on. The show, by the end of it, is very much about Wanda and Vision, which is great. But I don't know. I think the showrunner, like, during the course of the week, came out and was like, "You're going to be disappointed. Some fans are going to be disappointed by the finale."
Right.
And I feel like, from a certain point of view, that's their fault for setting up such, like, very particular things. Like,
it absolutely is. I feel like it's the person who came up with that would have been like, oh, this is going to be like an amazing tongue-in-cheek thing that fans are going to love. And I don't know how they didn't think that it was going to be setting fans up for the most monumental disappointment in knowing that, like, the best Quicksilver is now going to become part of this universe because a multiverse exists and they've set up that as an idea in other films. And so, like, how could this not be like a monumental letdown that he's just some random guy?
Yeah, and I think like there are, for these kinds of shows, for like Marvel shows or any of these sort of like Game of Thrones, that sort of thing, there's the hardcore fans who make or listen to shows like this, who follow every theory, who read the Reddit, and then there's just the people who watch it because it's like the cool show that's on right now. And I think that when you put in stuff like this, you either need to be servicing one of those two groups, and I think the problem with this is it kind of did neither. Like, for the hardcore fans, they were like, I know what this means, and it opens up all the multiverse stuff and blah 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 and all the stuff we've gone down, but then it just turns out to kind of be like, I guess, at its most generous, you could say it's a joke about sitcoms replacing characters and not mentioning that the actors have been replaced with someone else. But I think that's its most generous. The fact that that's very giving it a lot of credit. And so what it actually did is just set a bunch of people up for disappointment. But then for the casual fan, I think watching it, it's just like, okay, like he's just some guy. Sure, like that doesn't mean anything to them. It's not an interesting reveal. Like the fact that he came back and was interesting, came back as a character when you knew that the character of her brother was dead, even if you don't know that the actor was someone else in X-Men, you still go, okay, like this other dead person is now back in her life. But then it kind of just fizzles out for them as well. So I think that that's the real crime with the handling the whole Quicksilver thing is no group of the audience kind of went, oh, that was a satisfying arc or twist or whatever. Everyone just kind of went, oh, that wasn't what I thought it was, and then, no, that's a bit disappointing. And plus, you never want people to be going, oh wow, think of all the cool stuff that could do this, and then it doesn't happen, and then you go, okay, I need to put all those like multiverse imaginings back in the box because that's not going to happen.
Totally. And I think what frustrated me as well about how the scene sort of played out between them is that they'd throughout this series been setting up Monica Rambeau as someone who is going to develop powers and, you know, go on to be a character in future films or TV shows and stuff. But then we're like, oh, we need to get her out of the way. So we'll have Quicksilver just come and appear, and then she can like overpower him, and then that's that. But she's occupied so that we can focus on these other characters. It felt a very like clumsy way of pushing her out of the picture, because she has these powers now that aren't going to be contributing to what's going on between Agatha and Wanda and Vision. Yeah.
But if you were like wanting to know who Ralph was this whole time, I guess that's exciting.
Exactly.
For you.
Yeah.
Like at least it answered that question.
True. Meanwhile, Wanda finally kind of faces her redemption moment where she sees the pain that she's been inflicting on everyone from the start. She kind of finally like owns up to what's happening, and she's like, all right, I have to just tear down the hex and allow everyone to escape. As she's doing that, Hayward and his punks basically kind of come in, and as the hex is being sort of dissolved, we start to see, of course, Vision and the kids start to dissolve with it, because as we saw when Vision tried to lead the hex, he, you know, started to disappear and sort of corrupt. And so now, you know, we learn, well, what we already really know is that Wanda's family is tied to the hex itself, and one can't exist without the other. So I think she allows enough time for people to escape and Hayward to come in before the whole thing is back up again. What I don't understand is like, why is Hayward like a criminal for what he's done? Is it because he created cataract? What's the deal there?
Look, he wasn't a criminal until one of the scenes that are coming up where he pulls out a gun and just shoots at completely unarmed children.
I mean,
that's why he got arrested.
We didn't talk about it earlier, that really brief scene where Jimmy's sort of brought in and he's in handcuffs and says like, I'm going to bring in the full force law and blah, blah, blah. But I think that you can still, I mean, no one is actually above the law. Like, even though you're the head of whatever, like we don't know what it is, but he's clearly doing something that he's not supposed to be. And so it's like if the president can commit a crime, even though he's the president, he could still commit a crime. So clearly something is there. But I think, again, this is an interesting scene, because it was the sort of crux of the two things in this show, where the most important thing, it was the setup for like all the emotional stuff that's happening in this scene. I think the best part of the whole episode, which is the grappling with the loss of, or the impending loss of her family, which I think is the strength throughout the rest of this episode. And then it was also just the like bring in the guys in the black Jeeps bullshit that was just like, we need to have them in here somehow because they've been sitting out there the entire time, so this needs to pay off in some way, and so it was the most interesting and the least interesting part of the universe colliding in beginning to collide, I guess, in this scene.
Yeah, it was just really confusing. I don't think I ever really fully understood what his plan was. Like, he was going to sort of launch nukes on the town. that had innocent people in it, or
as a
like
character, he turned out pretty weak. I think he started with some like, oh, this guy, there might be more to him than we think, and maybe he's part of this, and blah blah blah. And then he kind of just like, I mean, again, skipping a bit to the end, but like to see him just like in handcuffs, like it's the end of a Law and Order episode, was kind of just like, okay, like, why do I know this guy's name? He did none of the only thing he contributed to was building the White Vision. That was it. Like, other than that, you could not be in this show and I wouldn't even realize.
Yeah, totally. He was really superfluous. And yeah, I think probably the most satisfying thing was this face-off between Vision and Vision, because it's always interesting, like two computers playing chess. You kind of wonder what's going to happen when you see AI kind of facing off against each other. And you had this one that was obviously very much like must kill, according to my programming, and then the very enlightened, emotional Vision who's trying to kind of get through to him, and understanding that they're both kind of part of the same thing. I really loved kind of watching that happen. It was a cool interaction, and it was nice to see the kind of uncertainty in Cataract's eyes when Vision kind of unlocked his memories and allowed him to kind of, I was curious about what way that was going to go though, because they were kind of having a debate or an argument. And I was like, well, if Cataract figures out that he's Vision or he's the real Vision, then is he going to like destroy himself? Or if he figures out that neither of them are Vision, were they going to merge into one Vision? And then, we were kind of hoping that Vision would get a body and that he was the soul, and that the mind and soul would go back into the body somehow. Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of like.
Will, were you disappointed by that? Because that seemed to be the biggest fan theory.
Yeah, that the two would come together. I was happy that kind of isn't where it went down, because obviously the character of White Vision in the comics takes a while to come back to where he once was. So I'm glad that we didn't rush into that. I'm not. It's a weird exit where he's like, "Oh yeah, I get it all. Bye," and then just disappears. It's
he
like,
just flies away.
It was also like an exit that implied that something else was going to happen with him in the episode, and it wasn't until the episode ended that I went, "Oh wait, he's gone."
I got really excited because I thought I must have blinked, because I only caught that he just, again, another yeet straight out of the thing. I thought that there was like a switch and it was going to end with like, she's really sad. And then it's like, oh wait, you're not the same one and then they're fine. And we got our happy ending. It's like, and then we cut to the other Vision and he's on the table and it's all really sad because he's not with it. It's like they just did a little Texas switch outside of the door. And so that was where my brain went. But
and like I do like the fact that it's a Marvel show, so while they're having the conversation about the ship of Theseus, which I think is like an interesting conversation, they're just sort of floating and rotating around each other the whole time. It's like, we've got to do something. They're superheroes. They can't just talk. But I think that when he unlocked, it was interesting. When he unlocked the memories, the question is like, he goes, I am Vision. Okay, you now have all the memories, but it's kind of like, and I mean, this is what that whole conversation was about. It's like, you might remember that you loved Wanda, but because you didn't experience that, what does that mean? And I think that there's an interesting sort of thought experiment, I suppose, there about the idea of like, well, just because you remember something, if you didn't go through it, and instead he just kind of like got those memories downloaded into him, almost like unlocked in him, but not the feelings unlocked in him, then it's like he goes, okay, well, I did have this relationship with her, but now I don't actually feel anything for her because I never went through that. I just know that happened to me. And so
I don't know. I feel like if you cloned yourself and your clone has all your memories, and for all intents and purposes, like that clone is you, I feel like it's like kind of the same. It's more just that this vision kind of has a different personality.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, totally. And none of this is real, so I don't actually have the answer for you. But for me, the idea of like this Vision isn't a clone. This is like a rebuild of Vision. So it's not like just an exact duplicate that up until the moment that it was cloned had all those experiences and then just like split off onto another timeline. It's more like we built this other one and we're bringing them together. But I mean, definitely at some point in the future, Wanda and Vision are going to end up face to face in some way again, and so there will now be like, what is that like for her compared to what is that like for him?
It's called season 2.
That's called season 2.
Is there going to be a season 2, do you think?
They've kind of like umbrellaed that some shows may have a second season, and just with the amount of depth that they might need to go into that, I feel like they would need to have a solo thing for the characters. So I think a second season in some form will probably happen.
And I did not feel like that for the first half of this show, but after it totally just abandoned the conceit of it's like we're going through sitcoms and this is sort of super high concept narrative storytelling, and it went into basically just a Marvel show now, then I'm like, a season 2 can totally exist and it's just this for
because it's hard to know, I was like, is this setting up for just like how Scarlet Witch is going to appear in future films? But like I guess they always want to leave it open for every option, given the response to the series has been so positive. So the Visions kind of have their philosophical powwow, and then Hayward kind of barges in and tries to shoot Wanda's kids for some reason. I mean, I guess he kind of knows that they're not real, right? And so he's just trying to destroy everything. I don't understand his motivations.
Yeah, like I don't know how much they actually understand what Wanda's done. It feels like they've watched a TV show and they know they can get the Vision in, and that's kind of the extent of at least his knowledge, because he's not a very smart man.
No.
What's he doing? I'm so confused.
The vibe I got from that, and if this is it, I think it's just like not well explained and not good storytelling, is that he kind of went, all of this has gone to shit and I don't have any control anymore. And so now I'm just going to like hurt you, Wanda. But it was just a very strange thing to happen. I loved the stuff with the kids, and the Wanda going like, can you boys handle the police or whatever, like mummy like that. And I thought that was all really good. And then Monica gets the one thing that she gets to do in this show beyond set up other movies, where she jumps in front of those bullets.
Yeah, it was cool. And it was cool, I guess, seeing that, the kids getting to use their powers again one more time. We sort of get to witness how powerful they would have become were they able to kind of...
Slow it down, put a bit of music behind it, show him picking up the glasses, picking up the hat. There's the scene we wanted. A nice little bit of Quicksilver moment. But no, it happens in seconds. I was really excited. And then
it felt very throwaway, didn't it? Yeah. And then Dennings rocks up in her ice cream truck and then I guess arrests him or I think she says, have a nice life in prison or whatever.
Yeah, it's, I mean, just like completely talk about yeeting a character out of the season of just like, we don't know what to do. And again, that's just like, it did just seem, and I think I said this back when we started getting introduced to the sort of sword element, that I was like, this is not what I'm really here for with this show. And it turns out that this is not what the show was really here for either. It was very much just like, well, we know she's here, so she can just handle this part. Whatever. Very, very underwhelming.
Yeah.
It felt just clumsily done, and like they didn't really know where they wanted to go with it. And so then they kind of just tried to get rid of it as quickly as possible.
And also, everyone kind of just accepted that Monica was now a superhero.
Yeah, totally.
Like no one said, "Oh, wow."
And we never see her kind of freaking out about the fact that she has powers. She accepts it really quickly as well. And I guess in a world where superheroes exist, it's not like people are like super surprised by stuff like that happening. But like, I mean, I feel like if you suddenly woke up tomorrow and had like powers to do stuff like that, you'd have a bit more of a like awakening with it.
That doesn't happen in real life. Like, we don't have superpowers, so I would be incredibly shocked. But we are living in a world where like people win lotto every day. And if I won lotto tomorrow, I would still be shocked and still have some sort of like reckoning with myself and my family and friends. Like I wouldn't just be like, all right, this is who I am now.
Then we're transported sort of back to Salem, and Agatha's kind of doubling down on the whole, like, if you just give me all of your power so I can be the mega witch, then I'm going to let you live in the hex with your family forever and you'll be super happy. And, we sort of see that. This is dumb, but it just annoys me that all the everyone has a different color of magic. Like in Star Wars, everyone has a different colored lightsaber. It's just like, I feel like magic is magic, and it's just like, oh, these witches use blue magic, but Agatha's magic is purple, and then Wanda's magic is red, because that's how we identify who's doing what. And it's just like a visual cue for the audience that feels really like ham-fisted, and I don't like it.
Will, magic stuff is cheap.
Yeah.
And Will, you wrote this TV show, so can you explain this to me? How is this happening? Like, she whispers in Agatha's ear and takes her back into her memories, kind of like what Agatha did with her. But then within these memories, she is vulnerable.
I can only assume it's part of that whole, as she's taken on the magic, maybe she's got a little bit, she's one-upping Wanda as she goes, so she can kind of reverse engineer the magic. I also say it's also cool that we get to see Wanda do the thing from Age of Ultron, where she took control of all the Avengers. It's kind of that same mind control moment, which was cool to bring that back, including the speedy running, which I didn't think they'd ever throw that back in the universe. It's just this one shot in Age of Ultron where she runs really fast backwards.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was always confused. She does it to Agatha, and I was like, okay, I guess that's a power. But yeah, it's just one of the many things in this finale that they just kind of hope you accept. Like Vision's ability to do all the mind control-y finger tapping throughout the show is just
I just wasn't sure whether or not what we were seeing was like she's put her in some sort of like just manipulating her memories sort of thing, or if Wanda was actually in danger in this memory. Like, was she physically in danger?
I saw it as kind of like a Professor X situation, where it's like it's happening in their minds, but because it's a psychological thing that's happening, it's like it's almost like it's so real in their mind that it can be damaging to their body.
Right.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's how I took it. But I don't feel like it was very clear. And it was weird, as you say, that then, all of a sudden then that was kind of turned around back on her when Agatha sort of took control of the memory, and then suddenly Wanda is being tied to the stake.
Yeah. And then even though there's the potential for some cool stuff happening here where I liked the idea of the witches outwitching each other. Even though I wasn't quite sure what was going on, I liked the idea of like, I'm taking you into this memory, but now I'm taking over this memory. Like there was a thing of like how, Agatha is book smart and then Wanda is just like raw power, and how those two things come together. But then once we come out of this, we're just basically into like throwing giant laser beams at each other in the sky. and it just became entirely about raw power, and obviously a trick, but I was going like, oh, this is cool if what they're doing is like casting spells on each other to try to outwit each other, rather than just like the constant blasting. Because like Wanda has
may
all
as well
power.
Just be a lightsaber fight. And
it's kind of, it's crazy that you go like, you have the power to manipulate this entire town to appear like it exists 60 years ago, and for everyone to play this character even while you're asleep and blah 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 blah. But the way that you're going to beat this witch is just by throwing bigger fireballs at her, which like kind of feels inevitable, I guess, for Marvel stuff. But again, the fact that this show was prefaced so much on the idea that we're doing something completely different, it felt like again, third act not landing.
It almost feels like when producers are like, oh, we need to see some cool magic battles in there, otherwise we're not going to fund it, because that's what the people want. They're like cool magic battles.
And that's why I was really happy with the Vision fight, because I was worried they were just going to laser each other to death. And
the building would be falling down around them as they lasered.
Yeah, and they'd just be like, oh, Vision's trapped under that one. We can leave him for now. And then just but it's like, I like that they slowed it down and found a logical thing for them to do. And then, it didn't quite happen.
And as they got there, it was like, there's not a lot to Vision in terms of the things that he can do visually, but the idea of like trying to punch him and then he phases through his arm and that sort of stuff. It's like, at least you're seeing what you know the character can do is the way that these two characters now fighting, and their weaknesses, their strength is also their weakness against each other because they're the same person fighting each other. And that's really what this fight is as well. Like, it was very much witch on witch versus Vision on Vision.
Yeah.
And the fact that witch on witch just became laser beams.
Plus, it felt just very like ham-fisted in the way that we had this really expositional moment a couple of episodes ago where we get a single shot of each one of the runes, and Agatha's like, remember, only the witch who casts the runes can use her magic. And it's like, I wonder if that's going to be relevant later on.
And it was on the previously
and it was on the previously on, yes.
And there was that moment where like she fires off the first huge blast and it sort of it misses Agatha and hits the wall behind her, and Agatha sort of turns and looks and then looks back at
and it's just like you throw like a girl.
Totally. It was like, how did you miss me?
Yeah. You just have really bad hand-eye coordination. What's with that?
Yeah. And the really bizarre thing of that whole, it's tricky because they've established that if she does hit her, it's only benefiting Agatha. So it's like,
you'd think she'd be trying to catch them at least.
Yeah, like she never would have tried to hit you. Like
you're
the only thing
wasting
she's ever going to do is throw it at the wall.
Although I will say, the only thing about this whole fight was Agatha. Agatha as a villain is clearly the bad one because she's dressed all in black and she has a great laugh.
I love the blackness of her fingers as well.
Yeah, it was very cool. But she's not like, she hadn't expressly stated that what she wants to do is evil. And I'm sure that it was, but it's kind of that thing of there's that thing where it's like, who would you vote for? You've got a drunk who has had 6 heart attacks. He's a womanizer and he smokes and drinks all the time and he blah blah blah. That's one person, and then the other guy's a vegetarian who's never smoked. He's loved his wife and he's an artist. And you go, well, this guy is Winston Churchill and the good sounding one was Hitler. That's a bit like what if you just said to me, okay, so you've got 2 witches. One collects the power of other witches. Most of those witches tried to kill her, and that's why she took their power. And she's trying to figure out how to stop this other witch from having this town full of trapped people. And the other one is a witch who has trapped an entire town, even though she knows what she's doing and has like emotionally torturing these people. Which one is the villain? I'd be like, well, that one's the villain, and this one, well, I don't know if I can trust her in the future. Right now, it sounds like she's potentially doing the right thing. So it was a little funny that she's like, of course she's collecting power, and she keeps doing that laugh, and so you go like, okay, well, I'm sure you're not going to use this power for good. But aside from killing the dog and threatening the kids, she didn't really do anything particularly awful.
No, I guess it was just that she didn't seem particularly concerned with what was happening. She kind of did a good job of playing up the fact that she didn't care that everyone was in trouble or in pain. She was just like, this is all hilarious, and I don't know how you're doing it, but I'd love to know so that I can do it too one day.
That's true. I would love to do this on a much bigger scale.
Yeah. So, of course, she gets trapped in the runes. She can't use her magic. But she was about to kind of go for like a kind of either a killing blow, or she was going to sort of fulfill her promise to Wanda and let her live in the Hex. Which do you think she was going to do, Will?
I feel like it's probably the promise. I'd hope it would be, because Agatha in the comics isn't this manic evil witch. That this episode, as much as, there is still a bit of a grey area, I feel like they did push her a lot deeper into this evil character that just didn't exist for the entire show.
She was not letting her live. She was Avada Kedavering her. Like, she was totally like going for like the next snap one.
Yeah.
Even so, though, she could totally turn it around. I went back and watched some of the earlier Marvel stuff, and I forgot how bad Loki was. Like, he did some messed up stuff, and now we all just love him,
Rip eyes out.
Well, and again, a little bit of foreshadowing, I suppose, but like, she gets left in this world, and Wanda says, I know, I'll know where to find you if I need you. And it's like, well, you are very much like putting her here for when you need her again, Kevin Feige. Like, she's coming back, and I'm sure
she's
that
iced.
and I'm sure that the way that she will be coming back, will be in the same way as Loki has, which is like, we need you. And probably it'll be Wanda going, hey, you're the only other witch I know, and I need you for some witch guidance. And so that's probably where we would see her again.
Totally. So the hex, I guess, slowly starts to come down. Wanda collapses it, and the family, I guess, head home for one last beautiful sitcom evening together. This was very touching.
Yeah, it was fun.
The most like cheesy kind of way to kind of wrap up this whole scene where we have a family is forever. And
did you not like it? Did you not like it?
No. I felt like it was just really like over the top.
Oh God! Oh. This was my favorite part of the episode. This was really my favorite part of the entire show. This was the thesis statement for the show. This was like, this was brutal. It was, this was, at first I was like, are they doing what I think they're doing? Which is like the last good night, like tuck in bed. And I thought this was beautiful. I thought that if the show was more about this than it was about lasers in the sky and sword and stuff, then I would be ending this much more positively.
I guess I felt like it's pulling hard on heartstrings, and I feel like anytime you involve children and stuff like this, I always feel like I'm being like emotionally manipulated in a really massive way. But I do like that it kind of was like a little bit of foreshadowing about maybe they'll be reunited someday, and that would be really nice. I like the stuff between Wanda and Vision more than I like the stuff with the children, I guess, because the children are like a weird manifestation of I'm not sure, like, and it's weird that they kind of are these people that existed for a time as a not things that she gave birth to physically, but I guess just kind of created out of nothing. So I don't know. I find that kind of, I struggle with it a little bit, but
the kids are definitely an element of the show that will only make sense in time. It's like, you need to come back to the show in a year or so and be like, oh, okay, I can kind of get I can emotionally understand what's going on. There's context to come. Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from.
Totally, like comic book wise, there's a lot of stuff with the kids whereas this feels pretty spot on as to like how the kids are being like. While it's weird the way that they came about, it's closer to the comics than you would expect. But also, I just feel like this is a show that is attempting to grapple with the idea of grief and loss, and the fact that they were created, the fact that they weren't like existing in outside of the hex, doesn't mean that the feelings that Wanda and Vision had for them were any less real. Obviously there was like a shorter timeline there, but I like saying goodbye to them and her sort of like closing the door on this family and this dream with Vision was this really, really hit me. And I mean, like I have kids, so obviously it hits me in that way. But I also just felt like from the standpoint of what the controlling idea of the show was, I thought that this and the conversation between Wanda and Vision, where they were saying goodbye, was the reason that we made this TV show.
Yeah, right. I guess it's hard for me to understand without having the knowledge of the comics, like how what is a universe in which they can come back and do they retain the memories of everything that happened, and where did they go, and how did they exist, and do they still exist somewhere else? It's
definitely a scene that will
explain all of that.
Some context.
Also, in this scene, this is where because like then with the goodbye, when the hex closes around, I thought that was really effective. As he disappears and she's back standing just on that empty lot, and then as she walks through the townsfolk, and I liked that thing of I kept going, why aren't these people attacking her? Because she's basically ruined their life. And then I went, oh, that's right, because she's like an all-powerful witch who's had them hostage for months now.
I sort of took that. I took that as like, because remember how she says like, they were all kind of saying to her, we feel your pain. Like, we felt
your
all of that.
Your nightmares are our nightmares and stuff.
Yeah. So I feel like they've been very connected to her grief throughout all of this. So even though they're like shitty at her for what she did, I think there's a bit of understanding from the town's part that she was going through something like really traumatic, and I don't know if they fully understand why that manifested itself as this weird Pleasantville that they were all puppets in, but I think they kind of understood that it was coming from a place of sadness, and so
It's
maybe
like-
they were just kind of just like, just get out of here. We know you're hurting, but just like, please don't do that again.
Yeah, we know why you did this. Why did you do it to us?
Yeah. But at least Monica is still on her team, so that's nice.
I love that line of they'll never understand what you sacrificed for them or gave up for them, and it's like, yes, that's true, but also like, let's not pretend you're innocent in all this. Like, you this wasn't some great burden, that sacrifice that you did. You only lost something because you created it in the first place. Like, you gave up something that you created by stealing these people's lives for a couple of months. That's not necessarily a heroic thing.
Yeah, so that was kind of the end of the episode. Then we had this kind of mid-credit sequence. Do you want to explain a little bit about this, Will? Because I don't fully understand what we were looking at. Is this, we saw kind of Jimmy being like a boss. We're probably going to see more of him in the MCU, but then Monica.
I think so. Yeah.
Monica kind of.
Jimmy could is possibly going to lead a team of Avengers, like
a Nick Fury style.
Yeah, which would be really exciting to see.
Avengers who just do soft magic, like card tricks and
Well, I mean, there's Gambit. He can throw cards.
That's true. Gambit can throw cards, so that's something. Throw cards.
But yeah, then another miscellaneous sword agent or FBI badge-wearing person comes over and tells Monica to come into the theater. It's all very weird. It's like they just need to get her to this location to do a clever reveal, but it feels bizarre. But we get a reveal that this random person is a Skrull, which we obviously saw in Captain Marvel, which was all S.H.I.E.L.D. based, and also Monica's mother was all hanging out with Skrulls, and Nick Fury. And then obviously she went on to help found S.W.O.R.D., which is in space currently with Nick Fury that we saw at the end of Far From Home, the last Spider-Man movie.
Right.
So the kind of impression is that Monica is going to be up in space with Nick Fury, probably at the start of Captain Marvel 2.
There's so many things that I have to keep in my head from all the millions of films. It's very, like, it's so hard to keep up with. I forgot about that at the end of Far From Home.
That one little scene. And like, even so, there's a lot of throwaway characters that, like, this show especially is now making important, that it's going to just even further muddy your memory. It's like, I have to remember Ben Mendelsohn? Like, when was he relevant?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he was great, wasn't he? He was so good.
He's the perfect Skrull.
Then there was, like, a surprise. There was another post-credit sequence, which was good because I was kind of left at that point with that being the sort of mid-credits reveal. Kind of didn't leave me feeling super satisfied with that as the end of the show. And then the kind of like post-credit sequence happened. And that was really exciting because we got to kind of see Wanda somewhere, looked like either Alaska or maybe she'd gone back to Sokovia. I don't know. It was a very kind of remote location. She's in a little cabin and she's just like, looks like she's just living a really quiet, solitary hedge witch life and you know, just keeping her head down until we kind of see this other version of herself that's seriously reading up on the Darkhold book, which can't be good.
That's not a good book to be reading. You could be reading literally anything else and I'd feel safer.
Yeah. And then we kind of hear cries from children. Were those her children?
The subtitles, I think, confirm it says Billy is the one, which makes sense being Wiccan, who is kind of within the magic-y realm.
Oh, okay. So that's where they go.
Yeah. So, I mean,
and she's trying to get them back.
I just thought it was random screaming until I was talking to one of my friends, and they're like, "Oh, did you hear the kids?" And I'm like, "What kids?
Did you seriously?"
Yeah.
Wow.
I couldn't hear Mummy. I couldn't hear Help Us. I didn't hear any of the
I heard children's voices, but I couldn't hear what they were saying, I don't think.
And Steph, did you think it was her kids or did you just think it was... random.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't sure.
Isn't it just so funny how we all interpret things differently? I was like, there's no way that this is like, I don't need to read anything. I know that that's her kids. Of course that's her kids. And then you guys are like, A, I didn't hear children. And B, I did hear children. And I didn't think they were her children. And so it's just like, fuck me.
Maybe it is though, because you have kids, you're like especially attuned.
Could be. I can hear the pain. Now, I felt very conflicted on this because I know who the kids turn into. So I was like, these kids aren't dead. These kids will come back in some way. I feel like it's only here because it's setting up future stuff. But even though I didn't want the kids to die because I hate that, it's like, that's what the show needed to happen. Like, if you're going to make a show about grief and about coming to terms and reckoning with the loss of the people that you love, to me it seems a bit of a cop-out to build your entire show around that, and to then she accepts the loss of her family, and then you literally have 4 minutes of credits, and then you go, nah, it's fine, she'll see him again. It felt like it's just a very I guess it feels very comic booky when no one really dies, but it was like, for it to happen at the end of this show, it kind of discounts a bit the emotional growth that she goes on, because it's like, because particularly I don't want to keep, well, no, I do want to keep splitting the show into like the first half of the season and the second half, but the first half was super prestige television style storytelling. This first half was like, we are doing a thing, and this thing has a theme. And then the second half of the show is, we are doing the Marvel thing, and the theme is lasers. And so then to sort of like, to let her be able to like not really come to terms with her grief and loss, and instead be like, oh no, you'll be a family again. You just need to like probably contact Doctor Strange and tear open the multiverse and go get your kids. That to me felt like a bit of a cop-out to happen in your grief show.
Yeah. Is that what it is? Do you think, I think the thing that I find frustrating is that I just still can't get my head around the physics of it, like, which I know is dumb because it's a show about superheroes, but like, I think for me, I never really believed that the children were real. Like, I wanted to believe that Vision was real, and I felt like, okay, there's a part of him that it exists as a consciousness of an AI that can be attached to a robot body or whatever, but like, you know, the fact that all of these other people that existed in that world were real people that were just being puppeted, but the children were just manifestations that she came up with. I guess I just didn't really feel like I understand her feeling the loss of them, but at the same time I was like, they were never really there. So in my mind, I was just like, I don't know.
Like, how can they be calling out to her if they were never really there?
Yeah. Is it just that they exist somewhere because she's created them, and so now they exist in real life?
I think that because Agatha had that thing of like, you can basically create things out of nothing, and like,
so she can just create people whenever she wants.
Well,
that's the thing we're accepting now.
I think that the way that you could think of it is like, we only exist in this universe, right? If you collapsed this universe, we would stop existing. And if we tried to go outside of this universe, we would stop existing. And so it's the same with the kids. The universe is just much smaller. Like, she had Westview, and that's the universe in which those kids are real. And so that was a small pocket universe inside a bigger universe, which is our real world. So when that universe collapses, then it's gone into the multiverse. You could argue that that's where they've gone, because they were real within there. It's not like they weren't just imaginings. They were genuinely real within that universe, in the same way Vision was. Because then when Vision tries to leave that universe, he falls apart. It's not like people just can't see him. It's like, no, you stop being able to survive outside of here, as opposed to you don't exist outside of here.
Yeah, but then I guess it stands to reason that the way we've sort of set up the multiverse is that people can pass between it. So then it's like, why could they only exist in this one universe? Because is it because it was a universe that she created? Like,
yeah, I'll throw in comic lore, which I don't know how deep they're going to get into this, but in the comics, she does fabricate her children, kind of, again, the Mephisto thing that didn't end up happening, but could now still be a thing, I guess. But when they are taken from her, when they kind of dissolve in her hands, it turns out their souls did exist, and their souls are within these two teenage twins that exist in the real world. And then they realize who they are to Wanda, and kind of, they don't get their memories back of being her children, but they have the powers, and they have, there's a connection. So they could do that as well.
Because then the other part of me is like, well, if creating people is a thing, why doesn't she just like make more kids?
Let's make another one.
That's the most fucking heartless thing you've ever said in your entire life, Steph. Oh my God.
No, I mean,
Why
like,
you didn't care
but
about
like,
that instead?
it'd be the same kids. She'd just make the same kids again, just like refabricate them.
But
make
that's, I mean, we saw that with Vision, right? Like, you make a new one and he's not exactly the same and he ends up disappearing. I can't believe you just said make new kids.
Just make more. Oh no.
Never let your sisters see this episode.
I think the Doctor Strange theme was playing as well in that last sort of post credit sequence, which is a cool little nod to connecting those two universes as well.
And that was a very Doctor Strange thing she was doing. The sort of
Yeah, that's
doing one
true.
thing while
Yeah.
doing something else as well.
Yeah.
When Doctor Strange was learning everything in his solo film, he went into his astral form, had a nap whilst he was also reading. So it's kind of, it's definitely a little bit of that.
Doctor Strange is one of my favorite Marvel movies. I really like it. I think I like magic more than superhero-y stuff. So I think it's cool when
You're going to like the next 10 years, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
nice.
Doctor Strange for me was one of my least favorite Marvel films. I liked the end where all the universe was folding and stuff. But like it just didn't hit for me. So I don't know how I feel about the next 10 years.
Yeah, interesting. Well, in terms of the MCU continuation, we're kind of a year away from Doctor Strange 2, I think, and then maybe a year and a half from Captain Marvel 2, which is going to tie heavily into this, I think, with Monica and stuff. So that's a frustrating and long time to wait for the next continuation of these things. But then we've got, Winter Soldier?
Yep. This year we've got Winter Soldier, which goes into, I think, Loki, and then that goes into an animated show, which is called What If, which then goes into Miss Marvel, which then goes into a Hawkeye series. And then they just keep going.
Yeah.
And it goes on like this.
So that's just TV. There's 3 films as well.
So Steph, you've done a lot of the asking of the questions. I will ask you a question. How did you feel about this series? Did you feel like this was a successful season of television?
Yeah, I mean, I think the public reaction to it was really, really positive on the whole. I love that Catherine Hahn got her moment finally, even though she's been in stuff for years. You put someone in a Marvel, property, and suddenly they're on the world stage and they get their moment to really excel. Like I said, I really love themes around magic, and I like seeing women at the front of these stories as well, which is not typically the case in a lot of superhero films. So it was cool to watch that story unfold from the perspective of a female superhero who has a very kind of complicated past. I really liked the kind of tropes that they went through while trying to kind of keep it within the realm of something that was accessible to Marvel fans, even though I think they went a little bit too far in that direction towards the end of the series. It's a difficult balance to walk between appeasing the fans and doing something new and cool. And they definitely, I think took the safe route where that's concerned, especially since I kind of thought that this would be a lot weirder given that they were going to lead into it with other Marvel shows first, and then this kind of ended up being the thing that we saw first because of COVID. I think it was good on the whole. I really liked it. I think there were moments of cheesiness that I always have issues with in a lot of Marvel films, and there were kind of some characterization and sort of plot directions that went a little bit nowhere or were kind of clumsily executed. But I really like Wanda as a character, and I loved seeing her kind of come into her power, because before this series she was a bit of a nothing character for me. I saw her as kind of a tortured Russian woman who was like kind of appeared one day in the MCU and was like bad but then good, and then had a brief, what felt like a brief romance because we never really get, when these films have such broad sprawling casts, it's really hard to really get attached to any one character until they get their movie, you know? So I'm really glad that Scarlet Witch got this whole series to play out her storyline, because she's actually a really cool character, and I feel like I'm much more endeared to her now as a person.
Yeah. Will, do you, either just same sort of question, but also with more comic angle as well?
Yeah, it's totally stemming off the Scarlet Witch stuff. It's so nice to have her as a fully fleshed out character, because she's one of the kind of founding Marvel characters as well, that just comparatively to your Caps and your Iron Mans, she's just never had time. And Elizabeth Olsen herself, time to shine in these films. Like, her performance, no matter what the show was throwing at her, and Paul Bettany, of course, was wonderful. But yeah, as a Marvel property, obviously teetering off at the end, but I'm really keen to just rewatch those first episodes. And what I'd always been hoping, I feel like they did manage to do by the end, which is twisting what we watched throughout the show. There's like a hidden meaning that's now been revealed to us with a lot of things. I'm keen to see it through a new lens, I guess, which is very unique. A lot of Marvel films are like, they're never going to change. You can watch them as many times as you want. You won't see anything new about it. So I'm keen to rewatch this as well.
I think it's I think it like when it fell back onto more Marvel tropes, I became more disappointed, but only as disappointed as I can be with Marvel stuff, which I just feel like has a just constant level of quality where I'm like, well, it's generally better than most other superhero things that are ever attempted, and it's like so much fun to see this stuff realized that like I'm never going to dislike it. I think it set itself up to be more than what it ended up being. But the fact that they even took that swing, I think is pretty admirable. Like that it was trying to do something really different for half of the series was really impressive, I think. And not like it. This doesn't mean anything. Just playing the like what it could have been game, but I actually just think it would be a stronger show for everyone involved if you never saw outside the hex until the end, if you never had the sword stuff, any of those other characters, because it just felt like as soon as you went there, it broke that very beautiful, tenuous like suspension of disbelief that we all had in those first couple of episodes of like what's going on. And I think that you still could have had those sitcom breakdowns, and then you would just start breaking out of the sitcom within the bubble would have been more interesting for me, and would have just been able to stay in the characters' heads more, because every time we ended up jumping out to Sword, I was just reminded of like, oh, that's right, this is all just built into like all the other movies and all the other like characters that are turning up, and this is actually all just like men in jeeps running around trying to control the world, and that the most interesting character stuff was happening inside that hex. And I think I'm just disappointed that it moved away from that the further we went into the show, because those first 2 episodes in particular, I was just like, I've never seen anything like this on TV, and this is so exciting.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have liked that more or if it would have frustrated me, because I find sometimes when I'm led too far down a garden path that I get kind of annoyed that that I'm not getting answers and explanations, or at least more of a clear picture of what's happening. But maybe I just need to see it. Maybe I need to see your version of WandaVision side by side with the version we got. Be like, no, you're right. That's better. Yeah. That's better.
The 4-hour 4x3.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, my version of WandaVision would be The Leftovers, which is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and it works because it just so wholly commits to the like the pain aspect. And Steph, I guess in the way that you're like, I just want everyone to be happy, I think I'm like, I want everyone to be tortured for as long as possible until they begrudgingly resolved their emotional issues and can somehow learn to live with themselves. Like that to me, I'm like, that's the TV I want to see.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do really hope there would be a season 2 now that we've seen Scarlet Witch come into her own, and that incredible outfit reveal. Like, it was so good. Everything that I could have possibly wanted out of her costume was realized in something that just, like, it was tasteful. It was badass. She looks cool in it. Like, she looks powerful and strong. Like, it was fantastic. And now I want to see her like rocking that outfit, on the reg.
Absolutely. And I think what you said was really true about the idea of like sometimes it can be hard to understand who a Marvel character is until they get their own movie. And I think that what they can do with the TV shows now is, you know, what was happening with, even though they weren't sort of MCU shows, but when you had like Daredevil and that sort of stuff, where you go, well, these are characters who aren't necessarily being serviced in the films in a meaningful way or at all. We'll give them this, and this is a way to explore them. Not to say that Scarlet Witch is like a B tier character, but I don't think that like she's not at the moment, and you know, who knows what's going to happen. She'll be more involved now that we're into the magic era. But you could take these characters, I guess, like Loki and stuff, where you go, well, you're a really interesting character. We're going to explore you in the TV shows, and then we're going to pepper you into the films, rather than we're going to have you in the films and then pepper you into TV shows. So it kind of creates like a second track of, well, here's the like, it's almost like the TV shows will be the really big character development, and then the movies will just become like the Avengers stuff, tying stuff together.
Yeah, totally. Will, would you be looking forward to a sequel for this, or do you think they should just leave it there?
It's tricky. I think the biggest tricky hurdle is the title, which felt so tied to the idea of the television thing. I don't know how they would rework it. Maybe they just hyphen it or give it a subtitle. But I definitely want more time with these characters, and I think that a second season is probably the only way to do it. The interesting thing would be, hopefully they can make magic interesting for 9 episodes long when they couldn't do it in 2. So
does
be...
WandaVision, the comic, extend beyond this? Like,
there isn't one. They've pulled on a lot of different comic arcs to kind of
right. So this is not like it's not based on like a specific story. It's just like they've pulled in a lot of things from different comics and created this as its own thing.
The one that it looks the most like is the Vision, where Vision moves to the suburbs and has a family in a sort of 1950s style looking.
Which
like that's the one that if you looked at that comic, you would be like, oh, that's what this is based on, but it's not actually based on that.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool.
Which I could see them maybe being like, oh, this new Vision, the only way he can mentally work out how to be the Vision is to do this all again for himself. I don't know how they could do that in an interesting way a second time, but maybe that's a way to kind of make it feel like a 2-arc story, have the Vision create his own family again. But
just every Marvel character ends up creating their own grief bubble.
Yeah.
And
the sad universe.
We get to watch them all say goodbye to their children at the end.
The sad universe was the DCU. That was the actual sad universe.
Well, that is it for this Pocket Watch on WandaVision. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, actually, with a new Pocket Watch show. So stay tuned for that. If you've enjoyed our show, make sure you check out our Patreon at patreon.com/backpocket and become a sponsor. And podcasters, please drop us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, because that really, really helps us out. Check out all the stuff that we do on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/back_pocket. We do lots of stuff with video games there, and a talk show and news, really, really cool things for you to check out. And our YouTube channel as well is youtube.com/backpocket channel. That's a lot of different back pocket combinations, I know, but it's worth seeing all of them because they're all equally wonderful. Nick, Will, thank you so much for the insightful opinions and theorizing that you brought throughout this series. And I'll look forward to talking to you guys on future versions of Pocket Watch.
Whoever gets recast next.
That's true.
For the viewers, at some point, you should just put in Evan Peters here, and then that'll just never pay off again in the next season of Pocket Watch.
We'll see you later.
See you guys.
Bye.